Right. So talking about that, thought leadership, right? So these are some of the things we were first to the market on. I'm not going to touch base too much on that, but basically we are committed. So this just shows you that we are committed to our partners, to our channel, right? And through us, you have access to technical trainings, to consulting services, to different variety of services, such as the webinar, which we are currently offering at the moment, right? And we'll have a wide range of resellers and integrators and all of that. So in a nutshell, right, that is who we are at Spire. And yes, so open to any questions as regarding, how we support our channels, how we support our businesses, how we support you, the customers who are on this call today. And yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ikide. Thank you so much. That was straight to the point. So we're going to go on a quick break right now. And when we return, we'll have Ikide that just spoke to us, Chino Akachi, Information Security Manager from Layer 3, and Ekochi Njeze of Standard Chartered Bank. We're going to have a session, the first session. So when we return, just stick with us. Don't go nowhere. We would be right back.
Your network is not simply silicon, cables, and signals. It's a living, evolving organism of technology and people, and it's continually under attack. Protecting your business demands more than an element of engineering or foresight. It demands a new element altogether: Gigamon. Gigamon isn't another tool. It's a security force that permeates every part of your network. Everything in your ecosystem to make it more resilient, more agile, and more secure. In short, it makes the security infrastructure you've engineered better. Gigamon, essential element of your security.
All right, welcome back. So at this first panel session, we're going to have Ikide Ehole, Ekochi, and Chino take us in the first session. And so what we're talking about in this session is challenges faced in terms of security. I remember Ikide was talking about the region. So maybe we'll focus down especially to the region we are in, the African region. Challenges, cybersecurity challenges that we are facing right now. Over to you, Ekochi.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. It's good to also be part of this. So yeah, so challenges we face, right, in Africa with respect to cybersecurity. Number one is compliance issue, right? Compliance challenge, I would say. I will speak specifically regarding the industry where I work in, the financial services industry, which is a very highly regulated industry. And because it is highly regulated, the regulators keep churning out a lot of cybersecurity standards and frameworks that institutions in the industry will have to comply with. At times, these regulations actually conflict. The one that you've implemented one standard, and they'll be telling you to implement yet another one that it's actually similar to the one you've done. So the one that why should I do this? I mean, why are they doing say I should also do this? So you find out that you have those kind of challenges, but you just have to comply, right? And another thing, yes, it's good for the industry to be very regulated, especially in terms of cybersecurity. There's no, you can't overemphasize that. But we also have to consider the fact that resources are not infinite. When I mean resources, I mean time, I mean money and other things. So you see that because of these so many regulations coming up, the institutions dedicate a lot of resources in meeting those regulations. And at times it could actually affect other risks, the high risks that the organizations are also exposed to, that they should have committed such funds in addressing. So you see, regulation is good, but at times it can be so much. I mean, we can say unwillingly, almost, right? And you just have to comply with that. If you don't comply, you will be sanctioned. And if you don't take your time, your license could be withdrawn. So these are the kind of challenges that we face in this industry, particularly in Africa, and of course in Nigeria. Another challenge that we face is the challenge of privacy protection and data security. Now, by this I mean, first of all, for you to properly secure your information assets, you need to have a comprehensive inventory or list. You need to actually identify every information asset in the organization. Sorry, can you meet? Okay. So hello. So you need to identify every information asset in the organization. And I have come to find out that a lot of organizations in Africa do not identify every information asset, every asset that processes information in the organization. And what this means is that if you do not identify these information assets, you will not be able to manage their risks. So risk assessment will not be performed on those assets. And of course, what it means is that those assets will be vulnerable to risks that have not been mitigated. And of course, any unauthorized person or malicious person could exploit those vulnerabilities that have not been addressed in those assets because they've not been identified. As far as the organization is concerned, that asset does not exist. Meanwhile, it is actually an asset that is in that organization. So, and if it is breached, the security of the assets and by extension, the security of that organization will also be compromised. On the other hand, another issue with data privacy and data protection is the issue of classification. So you see, when you have a list, a comprehensive list, you also need to classify these assets with labels. Like, for example, you could say classify them from confidential to restricted information, to internal, to public, depending on the organization, right? Whatever they want to, whatever label that they want to use, they classify the assets in order of their confidentiality. Now, I find out that organizations actually classify their assets wrongly. So you see, they will classify an asset that should ordinarily be classified as confidential, for example, could be classified as internal. What it means is that they will now use or protect the asset or apply protection on that asset as an internal information. Meanwhile, that information is not supposed to be seen by just anybody in the organization, that information. So now you have protected it as internal, and it will most likely be accessed by, because it has been wrongly classified, it will be accessed by people that shouldn't have access to them. And you know what this means. It could be misused. It could be abused. So wrong classification is also a problem. Another challenge that we have is the challenge of what's it called? Third-party security risks. Now, organizations have been outsourcing certain functions that they were carrying out to third parties to now carry out for them. It's been on the rise, and in terms of outsourcing. And this also carries its own risks, including cybersecurity risks, especially if that third party that you are outsourcing does not conform with the same cybersecurity standards that you conform with, right? That you adhere to, right? So what it means is that before outsourcing, you must ensure that you build in security from the planning phase up until you finally outsource it, and ensure that the organization you are outsourcing this to, that function to, you have carried a level of assessment on them. And apart from that, you also build into the contracts of that the contract that you're going to execute for that particular function. You build in certain clauses that will protect your asset as well, or protect that outsourcing function from cyber breaches, right? This third-party risk is even more important in this age of cloud services. A lot of organizations are now embracing cloud services, moving their data center to the cloud and all that. You see, there's a challenge of regulation with cloud services because of certain regulation like GDPR. Like, GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation that countries have. So the countries have their own GDPR regulation, right? So, and it could conflict, right? So assuming you are in Nigeria and your data center is in AWS, probably somewhere in the US or whatever, or Europe, and maybe the DR is also probably in Azure, somewhere in Asia. You see that you have to contend with the regulations of several countries and several jurisdictions. So this poses a challenge. So another challenge is also the challenge of technology itself. What I mean by technology, I mean technology is good. Customers of organizations, their lives have been made easier with innovations and digitization that has been enabled by technology, right? But you see, these customers have seen that a lot of things are now possible. So their demands are increasing. Their service level expectations are also increasing. In the industry where I work in, our regulator, our chief regulator, which is the central bank, actually mandates banks. There's a mandate for banks to agree to certain service levels with customers. And if you violate these service levels, there are sanctions that will be meted out to that institution, that bank. So it's also a challenge. Another challenge we have are the emerging threats that are coming, advanced threats. You see, cyber criminals are sophisticated. They are highly skilled in what they do. They have the time, they have the resources. At times, they are even state-sponsored to tell you the level of funding that they receive. They are ahead of the good people. When I mean good people, I mean people that are doing the good, normally trying to do their own businesses and all that, trying to secure their assets. They are ahead of us because they have all the time in this world to update their skills, to learn new things and all that on how to wreak havoc. So we are actually chasing after them. That's the reality. And the truth is that there are two categories of organizations when it comes to cyber attacks. One is organizations that have been hacked. The second category is organizations that will be hacked. So it presupposes that every organization will be hacked or has been hacked. That will tell you how good these cyber criminals are. And they continue to improve. They continue to improve. So this kind of threats is what organizations face on a day-to-day basis. So that is emergency. So they learn new skills, they discover new vulnerabilities, they exploit them, they learn how to exploit them, they have all the time on earth to learn these things and all that. So this is also one of the major threats that organizations in Africa and even in the world at large face. So I will stop here now for this particular question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very, very much. So I'm going to hand over to Ikide. But Ikide, I'm going to take right off from what he said. He mentioned something about state-sponsored attacks. And I remember sometime in June 2020, about this time last year, the Ethiopian Information Network Security Agency thwarted a cyber attack from one Egyptian group called Cyber Horus. It was the idea behind that really was, maybe to cause some level of destabilization, but we never before thought that could happen in the African region. We always thought anytime cyber attacks happen at this level, we're always maybe China or Russia. Now, I want to direct a question to you, Ikide. What are how has cybersecurity helped in staying secure? What are the advantages of a modernized cyber security parameter, especially with the African context in mind? Ikide, over to you.
All right, thank you very much for that question. So I'll pick up from some of the points which you made, right? So yes, the attacks that are within our region are peculiar to us, right? And whatever security policy or strategy or tool we're using to mitigate an attack, that has to be considered as well in terms of how capable that is, right? So we have security tools and services as well, right, that are able to mitigate some of these attacks which you've mentioned, right? Like the Cyber Horus, for example, like even the more prevalent SolarWinds breach from APT38, we see a lot of these state-sponsored groups, mainly from Russia and China and all of that. And Africa is becoming a hot target for them too, because they've seen that there are vulnerabilities that can be explored within a lot of infrastructure within the financial sector, right? So, but I'll also just touch base on some of the benefits of the modern security which we have today, right? So the first thing I will talk about is, of course, the ability for employees to work more safely, right? As you're all well aware of, 2020 was a very turbulent year, right, for everyone. And out of that adversity, there was a lot of innovation that came, that kind of progressed, right? So people are able to work from home. Most people are working from home now. It's recently some people are getting back to the old model of working in the office, but a lot of organizations are still working from home, having employees working remotely, and then that has also seen a spike in terms of cloud adoption. Right, so most services are now running on the cloud, right, which enables employees to access them from anywhere. And we're having to see technologies like mobile device management, which creates like a capsule within your endpoint. So which would be your mobile device or your workstation. Sorry, I think there's some background noise. Can we mute? Okay.
Please, if you're not speaking, if you're not the speaker, please, you can mute your mic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. So as I was saying, right, so we've seen modern security solutions around the unified endpoint management, which used to formerly be known as mobile device management, which is very prevalent. We've seen solutions such as cloud access security brokers, right? These are solutions that are able to tackle the aspect of securing your workforce that works remotely. And some of these security are powered by the Gigamons and the Call Lights, which they will talk about in more detail, over the course of this engagement, right? But then, of course, we've also seen an increase in automation. So automation is also a serious benefit to security because there is a prevalent issue within our region of having staff of having companies that are either short staff or staff that are overwhelmed. So you're having people doing the work of a lot of people, and then that creates a kind of risk, right? Because there's only so much you can demand from a single human being before the human factor comes in, and there are certain mistakes which can result in a cyber attack, basically, right? So automation has also been a recent development in cybersecurity that has sought to address some of the challenges regarding the productivity and security of organizations. So you might be hearing of things like security orchestration and then response. So response capabilities has also increased in terms of what can be done in the event of a cyber attack or a potential breach, right? So beyond just protective. So if you look at the history of cybersecurity, the most mainstream security products were aimed at protecting you from threats, which is very valid in its own regard. But even with the amount of protection that we put in place, we still see breaches here and there. So the focus is now shifting a little bit beyond just protecting to, okay, I have XYZ protection in place. But in the advent where there is a potential breach, what is my ability? What do I do? How do I respond to that breach? What is the speed? So in certain critical situations, the speed of response also becomes very important. And that is where we've also seen this modern cybersecurity take keen interest and development in that regard as well. So the speed of response has increased by virtue of the kind of solutions we have in place, by virtue of the capabilities within what the solutions can provide, some of which the Gigamon and Call team are also going to just shed some light about, right? And also, talking about talking about external vendor management, right? You also have technologies that can give you a view of the security posture of an organization from an external perspective. So that is perspective that is available to any hacker trying to carry out an initial reconnaissance. Because of course, the first stage of any cyber attack is to get as much information about the organization as possible, right? So we're able to give you that visibility into the security posture of your organization and any organization you're looking to come into some kind of contract or business relationship with. Right, so that is an additional benefit. Of course, there are lots of benefits to the modern cybersecurity. I'll just touch base on the most important ones that are applicable to the context of this engagement and the region, right? There's a lot of security awareness also available, right, from a campaign. So that can be delivered by partners such as Layer 3, where we run security awareness campaigns just to ensure that your employees are up to speed, because of course, the human layer is the weakest point when it comes to cybersecurity, right? You can have all the security tools in the house, but one compromised insider can undo all that investment in security. So you want to provide security awareness in such a way that you do not just educate your employees on behaving more securely, you're also able to measure the impact your training is having on those employees. So things like UEBA, which is user entity and behavioral analytics, they are able to give you that feedback loop in terms of, okay, you've done XYZ training. How much impact is that having in terms of that behavior of the employee? How securely have they been working since after this training? It gives you that feedback. You're also able to improve your training based on that feedback as well to target specific areas that you feel might need a bit of reinforcement, right? And then, of course, the most important advent in modern cybersecurity, the most cutting edge would be things around machine learning, AI, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, neuro-linguistic programming, analytics. Some of these things sound very complicated, but they are here to make your environment more secure, here to make you work more efficiently. Basically, these are doing the things that a human would do at machine speed, right? So when it comes to responding to a cyber attack, the speed at which you are able to respond and then the accuracy of which you're able to detect this threat is very important. And then we have machine learning capabilities as well embedded with most of our modern cybersecurity solutions, to provide that capability, right? And then touching on one other point that was made by Kochi, right? You talked about the ability to discover the assets across the organization, to classify that. So that is an area that is very specialized to Gigamont, which he will be talking about a bit. So they give you the visibility. So when you talk about asset discovery, you have solutions that are specific to providing that capability within that area, but they are all dependent on the amount of visibility. In fact, every solution within an IT security infrastructure is dependent on the level of visibility they're able to have across the infrastructure. In putting it in the plainest way, you can't secure what you cannot see. So you want to have the ability to see everything as much as possible. If you have a firewall in place, the firewall cannot block the malicious traffic that is not seen if it's coming from some vector that is a kind of black spot within your network infrastructure. If you're having endpoint security, it's the same thing. If you're having a UEBA, we're supposed to analyze the relationship between your users and the entities. If it cannot see that relationship happening, its capabilities are limited by what you can see. So visibility becomes very important, which is a strong point which my colleagues over the call will be talking about, going forward, right? And so in summary, those are some of the benefits you get with the modern cybersecurity solutions, services, and capabilities. They are much more extensive than that, but of course, if we go over every nitty-gritty detail of what can be provided, we would have days. We would have this webinar going on.
And we don't have that luxury of time to go into that depth.
Exactly.
But I think at this point, I think I want to bring Chinua into the conversation. Hi, Chinua, how do you do?
Yeah.
Chinua, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Chinua, I can hear you. So Chinua, I'm going to ask you, what are the problems in Nigeria in terms of cyber fraud, threats, and attacks? How can these problems be mitigated? We're talking now in the Nigerian context. What are the problems in Nigeria in terms of cyber fraud, threats, and attacks? We are a very unique set of people. The attacks they have in Nigeria may not apply in India or in somewhere in Europe. So what are the peculiar challenges we have with regards to cyber fraud, threats, and attacks in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much for that question, Ken. I think there are several cyber threats in Nigeria that are actually very particular to this part of the world. The first one is a business email compromise. I don't know if you guys know what business email compromise is. It's also called a wire in this part of the world. Okay, so business email compromise is when a hacker gains access to your email, okay, a company's email, and they redirect payments to the attacker's account. Okay, so business email compromise is very prevalent in this part of the world. We also have phishing. Phishing is very prevalent in Nigeria. Okay, and there are a couple of controls that an organization can implement to prevent business email compromise and phishing. You need to look at controls around email security. Okay, so email security, for example, multi-factor authentication is one of the most important controls that you can implement in your organization. Also, strong password policy is something that you need to implement in your organization. So your employees need to use strong passwords. You should also change your password frequently. Okay. According to statistics, businesses have in the past year they've lost $1.8 million. Okay, as a result of business email compromise and phishing-related scams. So that's why I think these two threats are the most important when it comes to the Nigerian threats landscape.
Wow, thank you. That was straight to the point. Thank you very much. So I think what you just said now, I can infer that the wire scam seems to be the most it seems to be the Nigerian calling in terms of cyber threats and attack. Let me use that way. It seems to be the Nigerian what we are known for. And I think that's what people like the hush puppies of this world was arrested for, you know, and you mentioned a few things that can be used to maybe mitigate that, maybe a strong password policy, you said?
Yes.
And what else?
Multi-factor authentication.
Multi-factor authentication. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's impressive. So we're going to go on another break shortly. And when we return, I think this time I'd like us to go deeper. So maybe when we return, don't go anywhere. Chinua, Ekochi, and Ikide, I'll be right back with you to ask you more questions. Just give us a few seconds to go on a quick break so you can have water or something.
Not a problem. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. Thank you very much for that. So while we had the first panel session going on, we had a question coming from Patience Iruke. She said, good morning, everyone. My question goes to Ekochi. You have enumerated all the challenges connected to cybersecurity. Please, what do you think can be done to mitigate or stem the activities from these hackers, fraudsters? Thank you. That's the first question. And the second question is, what can organizations do to avoid their systems being hacked, especially banks, as customers are losing their hard-earned money on daily basis? So, Coach, you are the banker. So I think you would start out, and Ikide and Chinua would also contribute to this.
Okay, thank you. I will go straight to the point. Security is as strong as the weakest link, right? And in cybersecurity, the weakest link are the human beings. Human beings are the weakest link because of lack of awareness. That is one. Two is because of deliberate actions that they take. Probably collusion or internal abuse, deliberate internal abuse. So I will start with security awareness. So in Nigeria, we do not take security awareness seriously, both from the organizational, the staff of the organization, and also for the customers. A lot of staff do not know what to do in situation where there's a potential attack or compromise that may occur, right? So, like somebody mentioned phishing, right? Phishing are targeted at vulnerable people. The vulnerability is actually the human being. So they send a phishing mail. Even this business email compromise that we mentioned, most of the compromises from BEC is actually done by human beings. So they send you a phishing email with probably a link containing a malware. And they tell you lovely things that will attract your attention. But because you lack knowledge on how to know how to verify if this email is coming from the right source, you go ahead and click on that link, boom, malware gets installed, creates a backdoor on your computer. The bad guy enters, and that's it. Hijacks your email account, and that's it. But if the organization creates awareness on a regular basis, and also have a way of testing that people are actually getting this education well, that it is effective, then if they don't do all this, I'm sorry, no matter the technology they deploy to protect themselves, no matter the kind of wonderful next-gen firewall they would deploy, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, whatever you call them, whatever technology, anti-malware, antivirus, whatever, if they do not educate their staff and ensure that education is effective, test them for that knowledge, that organization will still be susceptible and vulnerable to attacks via phishing or other social engineering.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Kochi. Yeah. I agree with you absolutely.
So they need to take security awareness seriously on the part of the staff and also on the part of the customers. The customers can also be breached, and when they are breached, the organization can also be breached. Okay. So an attacker can hijack a customer's account,
of course,
and use that to gain access to the bank's network.
Okay, so I would like to say something at this point. I would like our participants to send in their questions. You have the chat room. You can send in your questions. We have questions coming in. So I'm going to take this to Chinua. Chinua, he said something about would you not take security seriously? And one way to take that seriously is to educate staff and users, customers. So both the provider and the end user of maybe the bank, of the organizations that patients mentioned. So how else can we help drive security awareness?
Okay, so I think the banks in this part of the world, I think they're actually doing a pretty good job at security awareness. At least the accounts I have, I usually get awareness emails from my bank once in a while, especially if there's a particular scam that is going on. The bank will send you an email and say, this is what is going on, don't fall for this scam. Okay, so I think the banks are actually, the financial sector, they're doing a very good job at security awareness. However, there's still room for improvement. Okay, so like my co-panelist mentioned, one of the ways after doing awareness, it's not just enough for you to do awareness and just go like that. You should actually measure the effectiveness of your training program. Okay, so you need to be sure that the training program that you've implemented is effective. One of the ways that we do that is through phishing tests. Okay, so once in a while, you can send your employees a phishing email, okay, that looks like it's coming from the CEO, it's coming from top executive in the organization, and then you would know who actually clicked on that phishing link. Okay, so for those that maybe it seems like they are lagging behind in terms of awareness, then you can do extra sessions for them to bring them up to speed. But like I said, it's very important that you measure your security awareness program. So you don't just do awareness and go. You need to be sure that the awareness program is very effective.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. Chino, and measure your security awareness program. So that's actually effective. That's effective for members of staff, but not for users, because no matter how many times, no matter how much the banks try to inform the customers, they still fall prey. And so I think these attackers have upped their game. They don't go for millennials. They go for the elderly, people who don't really understand this thing. Just call someone. So I think there's a lot more that the organizations or the banks need to do to carry people along. So the way they go about the streets preaching financial inclusion, POS, so the same way they should start preaching the gospel or the message of security. We're gonna go on a short break, and when we return, we have presentations from Vijay Baba and Basil Shannon. Well, we have them give us deep dive session for brief minutes into how to secure customer environments. So when we return, I'll hand this over to Vijay Baba and Basil Shannon. All right, thank you very much and welcome back. So at this point, I want to talk to Vijay. Hi, Vijay, how do you do? Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, thank you.
Good to have you on this call. So Vijay, you have a presentation for us, right?
Yes, I do. Let me just share my screen.
Over to you, Vijay, over to you.
Thank you. Let me share this. Let me know if you can see my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible, Vijay.
You can see the first slide?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to spend the next few moments sort of just recapping on what some of the others have pretty much said, right? You know, and focus and home in on one key element, and that's visibility, right? I think it was mentioned earlier that you can't really secure what you cannot see. And that really is a key fact, right? And I'm going to try and drill down a bit on that. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, today, what we're seeing today. You know, today, networks have grown increasingly complex, right? And they're going to continue to do so. You know, there's more data, there's more applications, there's more devices than ever before. And the applications are larger and more complex than ever before. And sometimes, you know, these applications need to scale to support hundreds of thousands of users. And operational technologies and Internet of Things, you know, it's penetrating almost every industry. And then you've got legacy applications that are still being used, and they're not going to be going away anytime soon. And their integration into the new applications, it's really challenging. And then you've got, you know, container-based applications, you've got microservices, you've got mobile applications and devices, and so forth. And all of these applications and devices are being deployed on what can I say, on more platforms than ever before, right? Including the physical infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, and as you mentioned earlier, a few people mentioned earlier, the cloud infrastructure as well. And this infrastructure, it's being managed by an ever-increasing variety and number of network management and security tools. There's hundreds and hundreds of security vendors in play at the moment. And every year you're getting new ones coming in because there's more threats that need to be distinguished, should I say. And the fact is that many organizations have around 10, maybe 15 such security tools, security SIM tools, IDSs, IPSs, firewalls, etc. And some organizations, may have double that, depending on, if they have to send multiple copies of the traffic to these tools that have to cope with the amount of traffic that they're processing. So it's really a complex situation, and one in which the tools that you have in the network are pretty much unable to keep pace with performance and also with security needs. And as the data volumes continues to grow exponentially, it's having implications far beyond than just saying, well, upgrade the speeds and feeds on an enterprise local area network. It's a lot more that's required than just that. The monitoring itself, the monitoring of the traffic itself becomes more difficult, and there's less margin for error, as inline monitoring and security tools can, really become overwhelmed. And when it comes to, network security, we sometimes tend to, fall to the side of caution, shall I say. An example is, even though certain tools are designed to be more effective with certain kinds of traffic, many organizations, they still send all of their network traffic to all of their security tools. And unfortunately, with network speeds and data volume and the number of business applications all increasing, the security tools, they're being pushed, far beyond the capacity that they were built to handle. And this increases the cost while also slowing down business applications. And ironically enough, it leaves the networks more open to attack, right? And this is where Gigamon sort of plays what it's really there for, shall I say. A much better solution, is to give your security tools that you currently have access to only the traffic that they need to analyze, while preventing access to the traffic that they don't need. And this is like exactly what I mentioned, we're Gigamon, a next generation packet broker, if you want to call it. It's purpose built for security solutions, right? It provides traffic intelligence features like metadata, application filtering, SSL decryption, masking, deduplication, header stripping, and it ensures that the appropriate traffic is being optimally, should I say, routed to the inline and out-of-band security tools. And you can see there's a few examples of tools there, as well as Core Light, because obviously the discussion is going to be around Core Light as well. And it's about getting access to that traffic, which otherwise these tools find difficult to get access to, or to get full access to, or if they do, then they have copious amounts of that traffic and then have to do more processing in order to find the anomalies and the threats. And like I said, this not only improves network security, but it also allows for faster application and network performance. So I mentioned a few things earlier, like deduplication and application filtering and SSL decryption. I'm just going to home in a little bit on that, because these are key facts, or should I say key use cases that Gigamon, really helps businesses and organizations with. And I'll just spend a few moments sort of covering that, with you guys right now. Let me just get to the next slide. So this is on deduplication. It's sort of showing you from physical, virtual, cloud-based the traffic that you get. I've just put it in letter format here, and you can see once it comes into Gigamon, we deduplicate multiple copies of the same network packets, and we send a single copy of the packet to the tool. Okay, so now the tool is not having to do multiple processing churns. It's just seeing a single instance of that traffic. And that increases the return of investment because you can benefit 2 times, 3 times savings in extra tools. It lowers the overhead on tools as well by offloading the processing that's required for the detection of these duplicate packets. And it hires the tool performance. It increases the tool performance overall as well. The higher retention period for the packet recorders, for the forensic tools, etc. Next one is another feature that Gigamon does once it gets access to the traffic is it does SSL decryption. Now there are of course multiple tools which can do the SSL decryption themselves, but again that puts a heavy load onto the tool itself. It comes at a very high cost, and it introduces a lot of latency as well because they have to decrypt and then re-encrypt again. With Gigamon, you can simply receive the traffic, let that be out of band or inline, and then allow Gigamon to decrypt that traffic. So Gigamon brings the traffic into its encryption zone. This encrypted traffic is received on inline ports of Gigamon. It's sent to the SSL engine within Gigamon, and it decrypts all of the encrypted sessions. It feeds that out to as many tools as you have. So it's not a matter of, decrypting, re-encrypting, decrypting, re-encrypting. You can decrypt and send it out to as many tools as you want. And once those tools have inspected that traffic, it's looped back and then re-encrypted and sent back out onto the network. I'll get to the next slide. Another use case, which I mentioned. Application filtering. Again, it's the network operations teams and security operations teams are always in a constant battle with each other. They need to have insight into the application traffic on their network so that they can better manage and monitor the infrastructure. But getting into the layer 7 visibility, it really can be difficult, right? And typically the network operations teams, they'll take an ad hoc approach to this, to gaining this application visibility and control, such as by doing some kind of hardwiring applications to specific ports or writing regular expression rules, that can identify individual applications. With Gigamon, once it receives the packets or the raw data from the network, it can identify and it can classify over 3,200 applications using deep packet inspection, and then sending out or denying specific traffic to the tools. By doing this, it sort of boosts the efficiency and the capacity by sending each application's traffic to the appropriate tools. That should be on the next slide. Where are we? Which doesn't seem to be moving. Here we go. I'll finish off quickly the next couple of slides just to talk a little bit on the cloud side. There's a big drive to cloud. And again, let's not forget private cloud, east-west traffic, as well as public cloud. And enterprises, as we mentioned earlier, are extending their networks across the physical, virtual, and cloud environments. And what's happening is, you need to provide visibility into applications and services on the public and private cloud platforms, such as AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud, etc. And this visibility, it's really important because without that, you're obviously not seeing what's happening within the hypervisors or within your specific hosts or within the specific VMs within each host as well. So monitoring this traffic becomes a challenge. And again, with Gigamon, we can get access into your east-west traffic and either send that out to physical tools, or at the same time, if you're in a public cloud environment, we can send that out within your public cloud infrastructure as well. So we have the ability to work both private and public, and we have what we call a true hybrid class cloud platform, which allows you to sort of get traffic from any part of the network. So this is just a final slide, just to sort of give you a quick final idea on Gigamon. It's all about, you know, it's all about closing the gap, the visibility gap, and getting that control back into the traffic that you actually want to see. And the Gigamon visibility fabric, you know, it should be able to get traffic from any source. It should be able to send it to any destination, and it should be able to be implemented anywhere. And obviously that can only be done with Gigamon by accessing that traffic, aggregating that traffic, and then transforming the right type of traffic, as I mentioned to you earlier, to your security tools, etc. And that's it for me, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vijay. I mean, that was spot on. I actually had a question, but you had the question answered. The question was, how do you integrate this with cloud? But your last slide spoke to that.
Yes.
So I think at this point I should hand this over to Basil. Hi, Basil. How do you do?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. How's everyone?
Very well. Good to hear from you, Basil. I'll hand this over to you. Can we see your slides?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, at least I can see your screen. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. So what I'd like to do before I start, I'd like to encourage everybody to put in their questions in the chat. And I promise to have some goodies for you at the end of the presentation, and also to respond to all of your questions. So I do highly encourage, I would love to see a lot of questions. So with that, thank you, Vijay, for the great introduction. And, you know, you touched on a lot of things that are related to visibility. And, you know, one of the things that's really important in cybersecurity is being able to have the evidence, right? If we look at any modern military, everything's built on data, you know, being able to understand what the enemy's doing, what type of weapons they have, when they will attack, you know, what type of targets they're looking to attack, and how can we defend those. And it's the same thing with cybersecurity. It's all about the evidence. It's all about the data. The more data you have, the more you can perform in terms of being able to defend your organization. So for most organizations that are doing business, obviously data is the new oil, because it provides a lot of information about their customers and what their buying patterns are. And they use that information to be able to market and customize their services and offerings. But for cybersecurity, data is actually even more. It's the new plutonium. It really makes or breaks the ability to properly defend your organization. So there are a couple of studies that I'll bring to your attention. One of them is from the ESG group, which talks about all of the different types of data that you can collect as a cybersecurity organization, and which ones are producing or giving the most value for detecting cyber threats. And the three that are really kind of stand out are network telemetry or network data. The second one, which is EDR, is endpoint data. And the third one is threat intelligence. So I'll quickly highlight what I feel, or why I feel this is accurate. You know, everything that touches the organization, whether it's applications or databases or servers, has to travel through a wire. And that wire is comprised of many different types of protocols, whether they're HTTP or DNS or SMTP for email. And those protocols carry everything into the organization, and they carry everything out of the organization. Once the network brings in the data to interact with the systems of the organization, typically what will happen is there will be endpoints, which can be considered as mobile devices or PCs or servers that actually have to do something. So whether it's a user doing work on their computer station, or a server doing computations to process the applications, that activity takes place on an endpoint. The third piece of this is threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is basically the ability to gather information from many different sources that have seen bad behaviors or have seen bad patterns in endpoint data or network data, and use that intelligence to be able to alert or give the cybersecurity teams advance notice of, okay, we saw this, malware traveling through your network, or it's being downloaded on your endpoint. We've seen this in other places. It's very malicious. Let's take some action. So combining the data from the network, from the endpoint, and the threat intelligence gives you the most advanced way of defending your organization. Now, what are the pain points that we see when we speak to cybersecurity organizations? In terms of Security Operations Center, which is the nerve center of the cybersecurity team, this is where all the information should be coming in. This is where the cybersecurity team should be able to look at their environment and understand what is happening 24/7, 365 days a year in real time. And some of the challenges that we see when we speak to these security operations centers is that most of the perimeter security, like firewalls that they have deployed, are generating too many alerts. They also have difficulties in detecting what we call lateral movement, which is whenever a malware moves from machine to machine using the network, or being able to detect C2 communication, which is command and control communication, which is when somebody, puts a Trojan or uses a phishing campaign to bring in a piece of software that is able to communicate to the outside world, which allows somebody to take access and be able to play in your network like they do as if you were an employee. In terms of incident response, so there's a lot of incidents that happens, and to be able to identify what really happened, you need to have that evidence and you need to have that data to be able to go back in time and look at, okay, we saw that one of the machines got infected and it stopped working for one of our users, and we need to know what really happened. So we need to investigate that. We need to go back and look at what connections were made, what type of websites were visited, what type of files were downloaded, what type of emails were accessed, and be able to drill down into that information to find the culprit that allowed this activity to happen on that machine. And finally, threat hunting, which is a very new sort of category in cybersecurity, which is going on the offensive. So instead of being reactive with incident response, now we are basically going to test our network and be able to look for bad activity before it even comes up. And those are really difficult to achieve if you don't have the right data. So Gardner talks about the modern SOC as comprising of those four pieces of technology. And those are, most organizations have thought of or have already deployed a centralized solution, which is usually called a SIM or an XDR, which is basically the ability to aggregate all of that data into one platform and to be able to use that as the single dashboard where you can access and look at the information and be able to triangulate what is going on. But two other technologies have emerged. One of them is endpoint detection, and the other one is network detection. So where endpoint detection focuses on what's happening on the actual endpoint, which is the PC or the server, the network detection actually analyzes all the packets that are flowing between these different machines. By having these two technologies and by having a SIM solution, which allows you to aggregate all of this data, you have what we call the SOC visibility triad, which gives you end-to-end visibility and analytics into everything that is touching your organization. And then finally, what you see here at the bottom, which is the threat intel, this is what allows the the capability to understand common patterns that are seen on the wild and be able to match them up with data that is seen on your network or data that is seen on your endpoint. So one of the things that metrics that are used when it comes to cybersecurity or security operations centers is the dwell time. And the dwell time refers to the period of time that it takes for a bad actor to essentially propagate an attack. So whenever an attack happens, it doesn't just happen in seconds. There's a lot of preparation, research, as well as different trial and error techniques that are used to get to the endpoint or the end goal that is required by that bad actor. Now that bad behavior or that bad thing that the bad actor is trying to do could be something like data exfiltration, so stealing company information and moving it outside, or it could be targeting a very high level VP within the organization to gain his credentials and access to be able to blackmail or hold ransom. We all hear about ransomware. So there's many different things that people are looking to achieve whenever they attack an organization. But in order to achieve that, they need to first gain initial access, or they need to look at the look at the privilege escalations, and maybe they need to move from machine to machine, and then they need to collect some information and understand how the login and the passwords are working, and then finally achieve what they're looking to do. So the average dwell time in 2019 was 78 days, and this is from FireEye. Sorry, is there a question?
Yeah, there's actually a question. Someone is asking, and I think you should speak to this. So right after this question, I think I would bring back Vijay and the other members of the team to address questions. But this one is, why is it difficult to deploy softwares in Nigeria to tackle insurgency and other security-related challenges? Why is it difficult to deploy a software? Is there a cybersecurity software that can be used to trace security issues in Nigeria? We have issues, insurgency, terrorism, kidnapping, and they take people for ransom and they make calls, they send emails. Why can't we have or deploy a solution? That's what someone is asking. Why can't we deploy a solution?
Yeah, I think it's related to three things, right? It's related to people, process, and technology, right? So obviously having the people trained and brought up to speed in terms of how these different attacks propagate and how they can be detected is very, very important. So it all begins with people, it all begins with training, it all begins with awareness around cybersecurity. And I think one of the steps that most countries in the world have done over the past 2 or 3 years is establish a cybersecurity authority within the country to be able to promote this education and to be able to bring this to the people and the organizations, as well as create mandates and policies that people can use to essentially start becoming smarter about cybersecurity. So this, in most countries, didn't exist up until 3-4 years ago, or even a little bit longer, because cybersecurity wasn't a priority. It really didn't, it wasn't a big thing. But now this is becoming very important. The second thing is the process. So being able to, for organizations that have, important national security roles within the country, such as banks, such as telecommunications, such as retail, those organizations need to deploy processes. So they need to establish a cybersecurity team. They need to split it out from the IT team. They need to assign people to the security operations center, even if there's no technologies, because at the end of the day, technologies facilitate this process, right? And then finally, technology helps those people do their jobs much, much better. They help with automation. They help reduce the dependency on manual work and manual efforts. And that's where the whole picture comes in. So we need to think about this problem in 3 different categories.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, Basil. So the next question is for you and Vijay. So the question is, what are the challenges when moving to a hybrid cloud, and how can we address them? So the question is for Basil and for Vijay. What are the challenges when moving to a hybrid cloud, and how can we address those challenges?
Sure. I can help with some of that, and then Basil, if you want to sort of continue.
Okay. Yes, please.
There are challenges, of course, right? Where would I start? It's probably fair to say that the hybrid cloud, it's going to represent the future of the IT infrastructure, right? So we know that. But organizations, they are going to face challenges when they migrate. And a couple of examples I can probably think of is, traditional network security and monitoring tools that the organizations have deployed, they're unable to see into the cloud traffic. And conversely, the cloud tools that they have are unable to see into enterprise traffic. And with attacks, with the cyber attacks on the increase, probably up 300-400% compared to the pre-COVID days, it's probably good to say that it's no surprise that this lack of visibility is really a key challenge that organizations on the path to this hybrid migration need to take seriously and really be concerned about. As they're, where can I start? As they're driven by by the digital transformation initiatives, they're also under immense pressure to adopt to the cloud and design and implement seamless migration strategies. And another challenge is that the organization's legacy on-premise systems and obviously the technical debt associated with these older systems means that the hybrid cloud really is the de facto architecture for the foreseeable future. But then there's also the other issue that by moving to the cloud, it's obviously you have multiple clouds at the same time. It can cause a rapid increase in IT complexity, right? And this creates this complexity, should I say, creates a wider gap in visibility, with each cloud infrastructure becoming its own island of visibility. You've got the leading cloud platforms like Google, AWS, Microsoft. They're constantly, improving the visibility within their own single cloud networks, but there's still a lack of unified visibility across, these hybrid cloud networks.
Yeah, and I think it's really something simple, right? Moving to the cloud, you're giving somebody your proprietary information, you're giving somebody your systems to be able to run. So there needs to be trust, there needs to be good faith. But ultimately, in order to have the comfort, it's still very important we go back to data, right? If we are able to monitor what is happening on the public cloud, then we as organizations can still retain the control, because if something goes wrong, we see it, we know about it, and we can do something about it. And Vijay, you mentioned that traditional security has relied on network devices and health logs, and that's where there's a visibility gap, because those systems were never designed for security. There's definitely a lot of gaps when it comes to the level of detections that they can provide, and it becomes almost impossible. You might be able to see when an attack does data exfiltration, but you don't really know how it started, how it collected the information, how it did reconnaissance, how did it pass malicious files laterally. So being able to know that you got attacked is great, but you need to understand what are the steps that were taken so that you can tighten up your security and you can go after the bad guys and catch them and be able to trace them and do something about it, because it could be an internal employee, or it could be somebody that's a customer of the organization and they have privileged accesses to the system. So it's very important to have the visibility. And again, traditional security has also relied on technologies like packet capture, which were really designed to look at a specific point in time and really not give too much context about everything else that happens outside of that. So how do we look at the entire spectrum of visibility, and how do we allow this to help us in our day-to-day roles in cybersecurity? Well, this is where technologies like Gigamon and Corelight come in. What we do is we take, whether you're running in the cloud, on-premise, or a hybrid environment, we capture all of your information using what we call sensors and packet brokers, which are basically devices that are specifically designed, configured, and hardened to capture all of this information silently without anybody knowing. And what we will then do is we will look at this information and use our analytics and our machine learning technologies to be able to detect bad behavior. So typical deployments can consist of capturing data from the cloud or on-prem or both, and feeding it into these sensors, which basically do a whole host of deep packet inspection, detection, as well as alerting capabilities, using threat intel, using machine learning technologies, and then feeding that information into your analytics platforms.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that, Basil. I have a question for Ikedi. Ikedi, if you can hear me, I have a question for you. Someone is asking, is it possible to track hackers? So people who hack maybe banks or businesses, organizations, is it possible to track them to a physical location, maybe where arrests can be made?
Yeah, that can be made. The services within that area are usually classified as forensics, right? And yes, so that is possible, right? To a large extent.
Okay. Yes. So I'll just add one thing to that, right? So part of the data that we collect is we collect source, destination. We even collect information about file hashes and things like that. So we have a lot of intelligence. We also do geotagging, so we're able to understand where this person is coming from. So, and we are also able to analyze DNS requests. So by deploying this technology, you will get a myriad of dashboards where you can drill down and you can actually literally identify specific users or endpoints or IP addresses that propagated this type of attack.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. That's impressive. I'd like to ask you this question, and I also like Vijay to make a contribution. How do you build a threat hunting program?
I think this one's for you, Basil, right?
Yeah, so a threat hunting program, we've got it for you. So one of the things that I mentioned is I've got a lot of freebies for everybody. So if you do need any of these, please reach out. First of all, we have something called our threat hunting guide. So this is a very comprehensive guide that we've created, which allows anybody to essentially, without even using Corelight, who has basic cybersecurity knowledge like firewalling and things like that, to be able to use this guide to be able to do threat hunting. Now, what does this guide contain? Well, it's got a lot of different things, right? It goes into, and let me just, let me just open it here. Let me just go to data sheets. All right. So it's organized by different categories of threat hunting. So threat hunting is really asking a question and understanding how you can answer it with technology or with process, right? So it talks about what is threat hunting. It discusses different techniques. So you need to understand the techniques that hackers use. So what is initial access? What is execution? What is persistence? What is discovery? What is lateral movement? And then understanding under each one of those techniques, what are the processes or ways that can be used to do that technique. So for example, under lateral movement, there's something called remote desktop protocol. Remote desktop protocol is something wonderful that Microsoft created, which allows people to access the endpoint to do maintenance or to do troubleshooting if there's any problems with the machine. However, a lot of people use this tool to access the computer itself and use it for bad activity. So how can we detect bad behavior around RDP protocol? Well, this guide will tell you specific things that you need to look for that will help you understand how you can protect yourself against RDP attacks, for example. So this is a really, really, really good guide that I highly recommend everybody to get it download.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you very much for that, Basil. Thank you so much. So I think at this point, I would like us to move to the poll session.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Basil. That was such a deep dive session. Thank you. We're going to short break, the last break for today. And when we return, we have a poll session for you. Just don't go nowhere. I'll be right back.
No problem.
All right, welcome back. Thank you very much for that. We've come to the end of this session, this webinar, but before I let you go, we have questions for participants who've been with us so far. I have a few names. I'll put you on the spot, please pardon me. But before I do that, I think I'll let a few persons just volunteer to answer a few questions. If you have questions you want to ask, it would be nice at this point to just ask your questions. I'm going to call on either Abimbola Kupola or Femi Adewoye or Ibukun Komolafe. Someone is asking, why is layer 3 not in just Plateau State? Ikide, do you want to respond to that? Why is, I think just layer 3 in Abuja.
I don't think I'm in the best position to respond to that. That is a good question. So maybe you can scale into JOS, I guess, if that is in the business plan, but of course I won't be privy to that information. Right, so yeah.
Layer 3 is in Abuja, and I think there's whatever you need to do can be done from Abuja, from Lagos. By the day of the digital organization, you don't have to be physically present in one place to service or sell to customers. So we can always, attend to you in Olabi. But I think Victoria would also like to answer the question. Victoria, do you want to say something?
Okay, yes. We can offer every other services. We don't have to be in JOS, but if you want any of our services, we can provide that to you. As far as there's business there, we're ready to serve.
Okay, I have one more question. What would be the best approach and also the best practice in handling any form of cyber threat? That's very broad, I think. What would be the best approach and also the best practice in handling any form of cyber threats? Chinua, can you answer this one? What would be the best approach and also the best practice in handling any form of cyber threat? It's quite vague, though, very broad, but
yeah, so like you said, that question is quite ambiguous, and you need to understand that in cybersecurity, there is no silver bullet, okay? So there is no single solution or control that would help you prevent all kinds of cyber threats. However, there are some basic controls that I feel every organization should implement. Okay, so for example, we have the risk assessment. It's important for you to do risk assessment so that you would understand your assets and understand what is important to your company, and then you would know how best to protect those assets. You also need to have some form of log management in your organization. So you need to collect logs from your servers, your endpoints, your network devices, so that when there are incidents or when there's a situation where you need to visit those logs, then you can always have access to them. Because typically when attackers breach your network, they would alter those logs, or they would even delete them outrightly so that you would not be able to trace what you've done. That's why it's important to have like a SIEM solution or a log management solution where you would always have those logs. You also need to implement vulnerability and patch management. Okay, so vulnerability management involves when you scan your network for vulnerabilities. When you identify those vulnerabilities, then you patch them. Okay, patch is just another word for update. So you need to always make sure your information assets are always up to date. Okay, you can also do penetration testing. So penetration testing takes a step further. This is where after you've done a vulnerability scan, then you try to hack into the system so that you are basically just mimicking what an attacker would do if they can access your systems. Okay, so penetration testing is when you try to exploit those vulnerabilities that you've discovered. If you're in the financial sector, you even have to do that at least once a year because of the requirements of PCI DSS. But even if you are not in the financial sector, penetration testing is something that every organization needs to do at least once a year. Okay, you can also do system hardening. So this is where you harden your systems. For example, disable default passwords. Okay, you'll be surprised that many systems, many administrators, they don't disable default passwords that ship with their servers and network devices. So you should always make sure you change your default password. You should also disable any service that you're not using. For example, if you have remote desktop on your server and you're not using remote desktop, then you should disable it because you're just providing an extra avenue for an attacker to get into your network. Okay,
Yeah,
another control that you need to have is backup. It's very important for organizations to have backup. Okay, backup I think is the most important protection for ransomware because if a ransomware has hit your network, the only thing that can save is your backup. Okay, so if you don't have those backups in place, then you don't have a choice but to pay the ransom or forgo that data. And then when you're also storing backups, you shouldn't just keep them. You should also test your backups because there are situations where you're actually keeping those backups, but when you need to restore those backups, you would find out that maybe the files are corrupted or there's just something that is not working and you cannot restore those files. So when you are keeping backup, you should always test those backups to at least once in a while, even if it's twice a year or quarterly. You should always test your backups to be sure that you can restore those backups whenever you need to. Okay. And then lastly, you also have security awareness. Okay. So even if you have all the technology controls in place, 95% of cybersecurity breaches, according to IBM, is caused by human error. Okay,
Yeah.
so you need to make sure that you have a good cybersecurity awareness training program in place to make sure your employees and your organization doesn't fall victim to cyber attack.
Absolutely. 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 Thank you so much.
I'll just contribute to that. Just one
Yes.
more item that I would just like to add to that. It's also
Yes.
recommended to have some kind of incident response plan. So this is a process that is initiated whereby there is a breach or a cyber attack within the organization. It's a process that will encompass most of what my colleague has already spoken about. So that puts it into a repeatable step based on a certain scenario that is being experienced. It's generally called an incident response plan. You would want to deliver the service to build that as well as part of your response here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Ikide. I have response and feedback coming in. Femi Adewoye, thank you very much for your feedback. That is duly noted. I'm going to put a few more persons on the line. Ogene Maru Agobe, Latif Shitu, Michael Olubusi. I'm going to ask a question. Any of you can respond. How satisfied were you with the webinar today? How helpful were the contents of this presentation? How engaging were the speakers for you? Ogene Maru, are you speaking? Or Michael? Or Olakpeju Iyola? You can type, if you're not in a place to speak, you can actually just send in your response. I guess they're typing in their response. I think I'll just call out more names. Patience, thank you so much for the questions. You've been very, very, very active in the webinar today. I don't know if you have any more questions, if you have feedbacks, if you want the freebies that was shared by Basil, I'd like you to just, let us hear it. Paul Oludele, Peter Eboyin, Rosemary, if you have any feedbacks for us, we'd like to hear you, we'd like to have it. In the absence of that, I think we've had an amazing session today. We've had an amazing, beautiful session. So we have a live poll. You can actually just answer the questions on the live poll we have right now. If you can't see your screen, you can vote on the poll. So as a form of pattern shot, I'd like to have closing remarks from Ekochi, from Chinua, from Ikide. Closing remarks from you.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity and to speak in this very wonderful webinar. Apart from the fact that I've shared knowledge, I've also gained a lot of knowledge. I've also had the opportunity of meeting a whole lot of experts here, right? And also I've had the opportunity to meet a the other speakers, and it's been a wonderful time and a wonderful knowledge sharing session. It's a wonderful experience I had. Thank you very much. And I
Thank
wish
you.
Layer 3 success, right, in their business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Parting shots. I'm going to hand over to G Mikes to round off, but before then, I want parting shots from parting words from every other person, Chinua and Ikide.
So not much from my side. Thank you for arranging this engagement. It was very informative. It was very insightful. I was happy to speak to the likes of Eguchi Eze and the other participants within the session. It was very interactive, and as much as we shared a lot of knowledge, we were able to gain some insights as well. So thank you for putting this together, and hopefully we have more engagements like this, going forward, where we have the sessions where we brainstorm and sync up on the current security threats landscape within our region, right? So it's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Chinua, any last words from you before I hand over to G Mike?
Okay, I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking out their time to attend this webinar. I had a wonderful time learning from my co-panelists and also the audience too. And I hope that we'll have more webinars like this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of remarks and feedbacks coming in the comment section. I want to thank everyone that's been a part of this. I'll hand over to G Mike for the closing remarks.
Wow. Wow, what an impressive and amazing day. Thank you so much for every one of you for being an excellent participant. Throughout the conversations, I just observed with keen interest, from the excellent presentations, all the discussions, amazing, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Kochi, Chinua, VJ Basil. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar today. I think with what has happened, I can actually conclude that the purpose of the webinar today has been completely accomplished. As mentioned earlier, like when VJ spoke and he said, you cannot secure what you cannot see. And that's the truth about it. Security information management should actually not be a reactive activity, but it has to be a proactive activity. And this was also further strengthened by John Maxwell's saying, and I quote, he said, if you are proactive, you focus on preparing. But if you are reactive, you end up focusing on repairing. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank every stakeholder, every participant on this call today, for everyone who is working tirelessly, really, ensure the integrity of our ecosystem. I hope that what we have learned today, what has been shared today, are things that will continue to help us in our day-to-day lives and activities and how we go about protecting our organizations. Finally, on behalf of Layer 3, I would like to express my sincere appreciations to the participants, the speakers, the staff, Victoria, the Layer 3 business development executive who has been driving these. And I think our moderator has done a wonderful job. Ken, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then to our dear CEO, Oyaje Idoko, for also taking our time to be in the webinar today. We say thank you. And so I would like to close my remarks and officially announce the end of the webinar session today, while wishing you all a prosperous second half of the year amidst the pandemic challenges. Thank you for your attention and do stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the privilege to have anchored this. Thank you, everyone. It was informative for me as well, and it's good to meet you all. Thank you so much. Do have a lovely day.